Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Candace, and I am 36 years old. I used to be a high school teacher in Charlotte, North Carolina, living what everyone around me thought was the perfect life. I had a beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood, a job I loved, and a husband who, on the surface, seemed like everything a woman could want. We had been married for 2 years, and I was 6 months pregnant with our first child, a baby girl we had already started calling our little miracle. No one knew, and I barely understood myself, that the man I had promised to spend my life with was capable of something so horrific that it would nearly cost me and my baby our lives. The day my mother-in-law came to visit was supposed to be another ordinary day of preparation for our daughter's arrival. Instead, it became the day I learned that the person sleeping next to me every night was a monster, and that his mother had helped shape him into exactly that. What happened in my living room while I was 6 months pregnant will haunt me forever, but what happened later at the hospital, and what one nurse said that made my husband freeze in pure terror, is the reason my daughter and I are both alive. 2 years before that terrible day, I met my husband at a teachers' conference in Chicago. His name was Rashad, and he was charming in a way that felt almost old-fashioned. He asked intelligent questions about my work, remembered small details I had told him, and made me feel like the only person in a crowded room. He worked in finance, made good money, and pursued me with an intensity that felt romantic at the time. I was 34, watching friends settle down and start families, and I was tired of failed relationships. Rashad was 38, established, and openly talking about marriage and children. When he looked at me over dinner one night and said, "Candace, I can actually see a future with you. A real one. House, kids, all of it." My heart grabbed onto that. Looking back now, I see how quickly everything moved, how possessive he already was, but then it just felt like being wanted. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. He did it in a quiet restaurant in uptown Charlotte, in front of a plate of untouched dessert, his hand shaking just enough to make me think he was nervous in a sweet way. "Marry me," he said, his voice thick. "Build a life with me." Everyone said we were moving fast, but it felt right in the moment. We were married 4 months later in a small church filled with flowers and smiles and the illusion of safety. The first year of marriage seemed good, or at least I convinced myself it was. Rashad was attentive, maybe too attentive. He always wanted to know where I was, who I was with, what I was doing. If I stayed late at school grading papers, my phone would buzz with messages. "What time will you be home?" he would ask. Then, "Who are you with?" and send me a picture so I know you are okay. At first, when he would show up at my school unannounced, he would bring coffee or lunch. My colleagues would smile and say things like, "You found a good one, Candace. He really cares about you." When I did not answer his calls right away, he would appear in the hallway, leaning against my classroom doorframe, smiling tightly. "I was worried," he would say. "Why did you not pick up?" One afternoon, I stayed after school to help a student who was struggling. When I finally walked out to the parking lot, Rashad was standing by my car. His jaw was clenched. "You said you would be done by 4, he said. "It is 5:30. I explained about the student, about the extra help, but he cut me off. "Next time, you tell me. I was imagining you in a ditch somewhere." I laughed nervously and apologized, even though I had done nothing wrong. My friends thought his behavior was sweet. My mother thought I had finally found a man who genuinely cared. I pushed down the unease curling in my stomach and told myself that this was what love looked like when someone really wanted you. I did not have the language yet for control and obsession disguised as devotion. Rashad's mother, Evelyn, was another story completely. From the moment I met her, I could feel the chill. At our wedding, she looked me up and down with a tight smile. Later, when we were alone for a brief moment, she leaned in and said, "I hope you understand what kind of man you married. My son deserves the best. Do not embarrass him." Her tone was light, but the warning underneath it was not. During our first Thanksgiving together, she commented on everything I did. "You put too much salt in the greens," Evelyn said as she hovered over my shoulder in the kitchen. "Rashad does not like all that seasoning." When I set the table, she moved the plates by an inch and shook her head. "You are trying, I suppose," she said. Rashad would laugh and say, "That is just my mother. She means well." When I felt hurt, Rashad would take her side gently but firmly. "Candace, she raised me by herself after my father died. She sacrificed everything. You could be a little more understanding," he would say. I swallowed my anger and my pride, convinced that being a good wife meant accepting the way his mother treated me. When I found out I was pregnant, everything changed overnight. I can still see the 2 pink lines on the test in our master bathroom. I sat down on the edge of the tub and cried with relief and joy. Rashad came in, saw my face, and said, "What is wrong?" When I showed him the test, he stared at it, then at me, and then he picked me up and spun me around despite my squeal of protest. "We are having a baby," he said. "Candace, we are having a baby girl." I feel it. For a while, he was almost giddy. He told everyone, posted ultrasound pictures, bought tiny baby clothes in pastel colors. At night, he would put his hand on my belly and whisper, "Hey, little one, Daddy is here." Those were the moments that kept me believing everything was fine, even as the edges of his personality sharpened. As my body began to change, so did his tone. One evening, when I reached for a second helping of macaroni and cheese, he took the plate from my hand. "You should be careful," Rashad said. "You are gaining a lot of weight, and bouncing back will be harder. I want you healthy." When I told him I was hungry all the time, he sighed and gave the plate back with obvious reluctance. At my 24-week appointment, my obstetrician gently reminded me that pregnancy weight gain was normal. When I mentioned Rashad's concerns, she said, "Your job is to nourish yourself and the baby. Do not let anyone make you feel ashamed about that." I thought about telling her more about the way he checked what I ate and commented on my body, but I stayed quiet. I was not ready to admit that something might be wrong. By the time I was 6 months pregnant, I was walking on eggshells in my own home. I was teaching full-time, coming home exhausted, and still expected to keep the house spotless, cook full meals, and cater to Rashad's preferences. If I sat down too long, he would say, "You use that pregnancy as an excuse for everything." I would force myself to get up, my back aching, because keeping him calm felt like the only way to keep the peace. When Evelyn announced that she was coming to stay with us for a week to help prepare for the baby, my stomach clenched. I did not want her there. Every instinct in me said no. But Rashad was thrilled. "My mother knows what she is doing," he said. "She raised me by herself. We could use her expertise." I tried to argue gently. "Rashad, I am already tired. I do not know if I can handle a full week of visitors right now," I said. He stared at me like I had insulted him. "She is not a visitor. She is family. You can handle it." His tone shut down the conversation, and I heard myself say, "Okay, of course." I spent the weekend cleaning the house from top to bottom despite my swollen ankles. I prepared the guest room with fresh sheets and her favorite candles, stocked the fridge with the foods she liked, and tried to convince myself that maybe this time would be different. Maybe the baby would soften her. Maybe we would finally connect. Evelyn arrived on a Monday afternoon. I had taken a half day off work so that I could be there to welcome her. She stepped inside, glanced around, and said, "It is colder than I like. You should turn the heat up for a pregnant woman." I smiled and said, "I will adjust it," even though I was already warm. At dinner that night, I served baked chicken, rice, and roasted vegetables. Evelyn took one bite, set her fork down, and said, "You did not season this correctly. Rashad likes more flavor than this." Rashad did not correct her. He only looked at me and said, "Maybe next time, baby. Ask my mother how she does it." The next few days were miserable. Evelyn reorganized my kitchen without asking, muttering, "No wonder you have trouble cooking," as she moved things. She went through my closet and said, "These maternity clothes make you look frumpy. A man still wants to be attracted to his wife." She walked into the nursery, frowned, and said, "This color is all wrong for a baby. It is too dull." Every time she criticized me, Rashad took her side. "She just wants the best for us," he would say. Listen to her. When I tried to defend myself, he would sigh loudly and change the subject or walk away. The more they united, the smaller I felt. On Thursday afternoon, I came home a little earlier than usual. The house was quiet. When I walked down the hallway toward the nursery, my heart dropped. The crib had been moved against a different wall. The dresser was in another corner. The artwork I had carefully chosen and hung myself was gone, replaced with faded decorations Evelyn had brought from her attic, relics from when Rashad was a baby. I stood in the doorway for a moment, one hand pressed to my belly. My daughter kicked, sharp and insistent, as if she could feel my distress. I walked into the room slowly. Evelyn was humming to herself as she folded tiny onesies on the new changing table she had dragged in from the guest room. "Evelyn," I said softly, trying to keep my voice even. "I see you have made some changes." She did not turn around. "You are welcome," she said. "This room was all wrong." I took a breath. "I appreciate that you want to help," I said, "but I had the nursery set up the way I wanted it. This is my baby's room. Could we please put it back the way it was?" She turned to me as if I had slapped her. Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me," she said. "I have raised a child. You have not. This room was a disaster. I fixed it. You should be thanking me, not critiquing me." Something in me finally broke. Maybe it was the months of swallowing my pride, or the way my daughter kicked against my ribs at that exact moment. My voice was still shaking, but it was firmer when I answered. "I am her mother," I said. "I want it the way I had it. Please do not go through my things without asking me." Evelyn's face flushed deep red. Her voice rose immediately. "You are ungrateful," she said. "You are a spoiled girl who does not know the first thing about being a mother. My son made a mistake marrying you. You are not good enough for him, and you never will be." Tears stung my eyes. "That is not fair," I said. "I have done everything I can to make you comfortable here. I am trying." She stepped closer, pointing a finger at my face. "Trying. You cannot even cook properly. You cannot keep a house the way Rashad likes it. You talk back to me in my son's home. You should be grateful he tolerates you." Her words landed like blows. I opened my mouth to respond, but footsteps sounded in the hallway. The front door had opened without me hearing it. Rashad appeared in the doorway, his briefcase in hand. He took in the scene in one sweeping glance. His mother flushed and furious, me crying and holding my belly. "What is going on?" Rashad asked. He looked first at his mother. That detail has stayed with me. He did not look at me. He looked at her. Evelyn spoke before I could. "Your wife has been disrespectful," she said. "I rearranged the nursery to make it safe and better for the baby, and she snapped at me. She told me I do not know what I am doing. She has been rude all week." "That is not what happened," I said quickly. "Rashad, I just asked." He did not even glance at me. He kept his eyes on his mother. "Is that true?" he asked her. Evelyn nodded, crossing her arms. "She needs to learn some respect," she said. I watched his face transform. His jaw clenched, his eyes darkened in a way I had never seen, and something in my chest turned to ice. He set his briefcase down very carefully, as if he were afraid it might break. Then he turned to me. "How dare you talk to my mother like that?" Rashad said, his voice low and controlled, which was more frightening than yelling. "She came here to help you because you cannot handle things by yourself, and this is how you treat her." "Rashad, please listen," I said, my voice shaking. I did not yell. I just asked her not to change the nursery without asking. "I am tired, and..." He cut me off. "You are always tired. You are always the victim," he said. "My mother cooks, cleans, and rearranges this mess of a house, and you complain." He stepped forward. I instinctively stepped back. "You will apologize to her," Rashad said. His eyes were burning. "Right now." I shook my head, tears spilling over. "I am not apologizing for asking for a little respect in my own home," I said quietly. "I did not do anything wrong." He moved so fast I barely saw it. Rashad grabbed my upper arm, his fingers digging in so hard that I gasped. "Candace," he said through clenched teeth, "do not test me. You will apologize." The pain was sharp and immediate. "You are hurting me," I said. "Let go." Instead of letting go, he tightened his grip and yanked me forward. I stumbled, trying to stay balanced, one arm instinctively wrapping around my belly. "Stop," I cried. "Please, I am pregnant. Think about the baby." He shoved me away from him hard. Time slowed. My foot caught on the edge of the rug, and my body tilted backward. All I could think was, protect her. I twisted as I fell, trying to land on my side instead of my stomach. The floor rushed up and knocked the breath from my lungs. For a split second, there was silence. My ears rang. Then Rashad's voice roared above me, filled with rage. "Look what you made me do," he shouted. "You never listen. You pushed me to this." I tried to roll onto my side, wrapping my arms around my belly. "Please," I sobbed. "Please stop. Our baby." His foot connected with my back. White-hot pain shot through my body. I curled tighter around my stomach, my cheek pressed to the nursery floor that I had once imagined lying on with my daughter, reading her stories. Another kick landed, then another. "Rashad, stop!" I screamed. "Please, you are going to hurt her." He knelt beside me, and his fists started raining down on my shoulders, my arms, my ribs. I tried to shield my belly, but there was only so much of me to go around. I heard Evelyn's voice somewhere behind him, calm and cold. She brought this on herself, she said. She needed to learn. I do not know how long the attack lasted. It could have been seconds or hours. Pain blurred everything. At some point, I felt a warm gush between my legs. It soaked my pants and spread onto the floor. The terror that ripped through me then was worse than any physical sensation. I knew I was bleeding, and I knew what that could mean for my baby. Rashad, I sobbed, I am bleeding. Something is wrong. Please, we have to call an ambulance. Please. His expression changed instantly. The rage drained from his face, replaced by a twisted kind of panic. You are bleeding, he said. He looked down, saw the spreading stain, and his hands began to shake. It is okay, he said suddenly, as if he had not just done this. We will get you help. Evelyn's voice floated from the doorway. This is why you should have listened, she said. If something happens to that baby, that is on you. I barely heard her. My world was pain and fear and blood. I later learned that our neighbor, Mrs. Denise Holloway, who lived in the townhouse next door, had heard my screams and the thuds of the assault through the wall. She had called 911 and told the dispatcher, "My neighbor is pregnant, and it sounds like someone is hurting her. Please hurry." The next clear memory I have is of uniformed paramedics in my nursery, kneeling beside me, asking my name and how far along I was. Rashad was standing nearby, his hands hovering uselessly. She fell, he said. She tripped over the rug and fell. I wanted to scream that he was lying, but I could barely breathe. One paramedic pressed a monitor to my belly, listening for my baby's heartbeat, while another checked my blood pressure. "We are going to take you to the hospital," one of them said. "We are going to take care of you and the baby." They strapped me onto a stretcher and wheeled me out of the house. Rashad walked beside me, still performing the role of concerned husband. "It will be okay," he said softly, brushing my hair back from my face. I flinched away from his touch. I do not think he missed that, but he pretended not to notice. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and fluorescent lights. I kept asking, "Can you hear her heartbeat? Is she okay?" The paramedic monitoring me said, "We can hear it, but it is a little irregular. The doctors will know more when we get there." His careful wording terrified me. At the emergency room, they rushed me into a triage room in the maternity wing. Nurses and doctors moved around me in a practiced flurry, attaching monitors, starting an intravenous line, checking the bleeding. Rashad stood in the corner, his eyes darting from my face to the staff. When a doctor asked what had happened, Rashad answered before I could. "She fell in the nursery," he said. "She landed hard." The doctor looked at me. "Is that what happened?" he asked gently. My throat closed. Rashad's gaze bored into me like a warning. "Yes," I whispered. "I tripped." I hated myself for saying it, but fear strangled the truth. They confirmed that our baby's heartbeat was present but concerning. I was contracting, my body trying to go into labor much too early. The team started medication to stop the contractions and monitored me closely. They told me they needed to examine my injuries thoroughly and document everything. That was when Nurse Lauren walked in. She was in her mid-40s, with calm eyes and an air of quiet authority that filled the room more than Rashad's presence ever could. "Candace, my name is Lauren," she said, touching my arm lightly. "I am going to be your nurse. I am sorry you are going through this, but we are going to take care of you and your baby." She began the intake questions, asking about my medical history, my pregnancy, and finally how I had been injured. I repeated the lie. "I fell," I said. "I tripped over something in the nursery and landed on my side." Lauren studied my face for a long moment, then looked at the bruises already darkening on my arm and shoulder. "I see," she said quietly. "I am going to need to look at your back and sides so we can document everything for your medical record. Is that all right?" I nodded. With gentle hands, she helped me roll enough to lift my gown. I heard her sharp intake of breath when she saw the pattern of bruises blooming across my skin. The oval shapes that matched fingers, the clustered marks that looked more like kicks than anything a fall would cause. She let the fabric fall back into place and stepped away, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. Lauren turned her head and glanced at Rashad, who was still standing against the wall with his arms crossed. Then she looked back at me and spoke in a voice that was calm and professional, but edged with something steely. "Sir," she said to Rashad, "I want to make you aware of something. Our hospital has a strict policy. When a pregnant patient comes in with injuries like this, we are required to photograph all of the injuries. Those photographs are automatically forwarded to our hospital's domestic violence task force and to law enforcement. That process has already started. There is no way to stop it. The room went silent. I saw Rashad's face drain of color. His eyes widened, and his mouth opened slightly. For the first time since the assault, he looked afraid. Lauren continued, "We do this to protect both the mother and the baby. We take this very seriously." She gave him a small, polite nod and then turned back to me. "Candace," she said, "I am going to ask you a difficult question, and I need you to be as honest as you can. The injuries on your body are not consistent with a simple fall. I have seen a lot of falls in my years as a nurse. These do not look like that. How did you really get hurt?" I felt Rashad's stare like a physical weight. When I glanced at him, his eyes were hard again, his jaw set. But the fear was still there now, layered under the anger. I wanted to speak, but my voice disappeared. Lauren followed my gaze and understood. "You know what?" she said, her tone suddenly brisk. "To finish this examination, I need to gather a few more supplies. And for privacy and sterile protocol, I am going to have to ask you to wait outside, sir." She gestured toward the hallway. "There is a family waiting area just down the hall. I will come get you when we are done." Rashad hesitated. "I would like to stay with my wife," he said. "She is upset." Lauren did not blink. "I understand," she said. "But this is hospital policy for this portion of the examination. It will not take long." Her voice was polite, but left no room for argument. With the mention of policy, and with the threat of policy and automatic reports hanging over him, Rashad had no choice. He looked at me one last time, his eyes full of silent warning. Then he turned and walked out. The door closed with a soft click that felt like a thunderclap. As soon as he was gone, my body gave up the last of its composure. I started sobbing deep, shaking sobs that I had been holding in since the first shove. Lauren moved to my bedside immediately, taking my hand lightly. "You are safe right now," she said. "He cannot come back in here. Security is already on the way to stand outside your door. Did your husband do this to you?" I could not get the words out, so I nodded, tears soaking the pillow. Lauren squeezed my hand. "Okay," she said softly. "I am so sorry this happened to you. Thank you for trusting me. I am going to call security, law enforcement, and our social worker. We are going to make sure you have protection and support. Right now, I need to fully document your injuries and keep monitoring your baby. Can you keep going with me?" I nodded again, wiping my face with the back of my hand. Lauren stepped out for a moment, and 2 hospital security officers took their place outside my door. When she returned, she carried a camera and spoke as she worked, narrating what she was doing so that nothing would surprise me. "I am going to photograph the bruises on your arm now," Lauren said. "Raise it as much as you can. You are doing well." The camera clicked softly as she captured every angle. "Now you're back in sides," she said. "I know this hurts. I am sorry." As she worked, she asked gentle questions. "Has he ever hurt you before?" she asked. "Has he ever threatened you?" I heard myself answering in a flat tone, as if I were talking about someone else. I told her about his controlling behavior, the constant monitoring, the way he criticized me, the way his mother encouraged it. I confessed how often I had felt afraid lately, how small I had become in my own life. "You did nothing to deserve this," Lauren said quietly as she adjusted a monitor over my belly. "Abuse is always a choice made by the abuser, not by the victim. The fact that he did this while you are pregnant tells me everything I need to know about him. But look at this." She nodded toward the screen where a tiny line blipped steadily. "Your daughter is fighting. She is still here with you." The police arrived about 30 minutes later, a male officer and a female officer. They introduced themselves, asked if I was comfortable speaking, and made it clear that Lauren could stay. I held on to Lauren's hand like an anchor as I told the officers what had really happened, from the argument in the nursery to the moment the paramedics arrived. "He told us she fell," the female officer said, glancing at her notebook. "But your injuries and the neighbor's call tell a different story." "My neighbor?" I asked. My voice was hoarse. "Yes," the officer replied. "Mrs. Holloway. She reported hearing what sounded like a violent fight and you screaming for help. Her call is recorded. It will support your statement." I felt a surge of gratitude for the woman I had only ever exchanged small talk with by the mailboxes. Tears filled my eyes again, but this time they were mixed with something like relief. The hospital social worker, a woman named Angela Ford, arrived soon after. She had a calm, reassuring presence. She pulled a chair close to my bed and said, "Candace, I am here to talk with you about your options and to make sure you are not alone in this." We can help you with an emergency protection order, safe housing if you need it, and legal resources. While Angela and the officers worked on paperwork, Lauren continued to monitor my baby. Slowly, the medications began to do their job. The contractions eased, the bleeding slowed. A doctor performed an ultrasound and said, "Your placenta looks intact. There is no sign of separation at this time. It is a serious situation, but right now your baby appears stable." When the officers left to speak with Rashad in the waiting area, Angela stayed behind and explained the process. "They will arrest him here at the hospital," she said. "Given the injuries, your pregnancy, and the witness statement, there is a strong case for felony charges. We can also file for an emergency restraining order today." My parents arrived at the hospital later that evening. They had driven the 3 hours from Raleigh as soon as they received the call. When my mother, Carla, walked into the room and saw my bruises and the monitors around my belly, she covered her mouth and began to cry. My father, Leonard, went very still, then stepped to my side and took my hand. "Baby girl," he said quietly, "why did you not tell us?" I broke down again. "I did not want you to worry," I said. "I thought I could handle it. I did not think you would ever go this far." My mother stroked my hair, tears falling onto my hospital gown. "You are not supposed to handle this alone," she said. "We would have come for you. We would have driven down that day." "It is not your fault," I whispered. "It is his. He did this." Saying those words out loud, with my parents looking at me and believing me, felt like a turning point. I stayed in the hospital for 3 days under close observation. During that time, I learned that Rashad had been taken into custody directly from the waiting room, charged with felony domestic violence and assault on a pregnant woman. He had been denied bail due to the severity of the attack and the risk to me and our unborn child. I also learned that Evelyn had tried to leave the hospital when she saw the police, but they stopped her and took her statement. In her arrogance, she admitted that Rashad had lost his temper and hit me, insisting that I had provoked him with my disrespect. She thought she was defending her son. Instead, she gave the police exactly the confirmation they needed. When I was discharged, I did not go back to the house in Charlotte. I could not bear the thought of walking into that nursery, of seeing the rug I fell on or the wall I hit. My parents packed up my essentials and brought me to their home in Raleigh, settling me into my old bedroom with fresh sheets and a rocking chair that my father assembled himself. I was 36 years old, 6 months pregnant, and back in my childhood room, surrounded by posters from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. The humiliation stung, but the relief of being safe was stronger. Angela helped me file for divorce and a long-term restraining order. She connected me with a legal aid attorney, a woman named Crystal Bennett, who specialized in domestic violence cases. Crystal met with me at my parents' dining room table, spread out documents, and said, "We are going to protect you and your baby. We are going to be very clear about what you will and will not accept." Rashad eventually pleaded guilty. Crystal explained that the evidence was overwhelming. My injuries, the medical photos, the neighbor's 911 call, Evelyn's statement. "He would lose badly at trial," she said. "The prosecutor knows it. His attorney knows it. That is why he is taking a plea." He received a 3-year prison sentence, followed by 5 years of probation, mandatory counseling, and an order for supervised visitation only, and only if I agreed in the future. The judge granted my permanent restraining order, stating that under no circumstances could Rashad contact me directly. Evelyn later tried to petition the court for grandparents' rights. Sitting in that courtroom, listening to her attorney argue that she had a right to be in my daughter's life, felt surreal. Crystal stood up and calmly presented what Evelyn had told the police, that she had watched her son beat his pregnant wife and had not intervened. "This is not a grandmother seeking a healthy relationship," Crystal said. "This is a woman who normalized and encouraged violence. There is no evidence that contact with her would benefit this child." The judge denied the petition immediately. The last 3 months of my pregnancy were spent on bed rest at my parents' home. My body healed slowly, but my mind was another story. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Felicia Grant, who specialized in trauma. In our first session, I sat on her couch with my hands folded over my belly and said, "I feel stupid for not seeing it sooner." Dr. Grant shook her head. "You are not stupid," she said. "Abusers are often very charming. They do not start with violence. They start with control, with small pushes against your boundaries, and they teach you to doubt yourself. It is not your fault for believing someone you loved." My daughter was born 2 weeks early in late December, by scheduled cesarean section. The doctors did not want to risk a long labor after everything my body had endured. I remember lying on the surgical table, shaking with a combination of fear and anesthesia, as my mother held my hand and whispered, "You are almost there, baby. She is almost here." When my daughter's cry filled the operating room, the sound broke something open in me. They placed her on my chest, warm and still a little slick, her tiny face scrunched and furious. I looked at her and burst into tears. "You are here," I whispered. "You made it." I named her Amara Joy. Amara because I had always loved the name, and Joy because, after everything, she was exactly that. She was proof that something pure and beautiful could survive even after the ugliest kind of violence. The first few months with Amara were both beautiful and brutal. I was recovering from major surgery, adjusting to sleepless nights, and waking up from nightmares in which Rashad found us. I would stumble to her crib in the dark, lay my hand on her back to feel it rise and fall, and only then let my lungs fill again. My parents were incredible. My mother would take Amara for a few hours so I could nap, and my father would walk the floor with her in the evenings, humming soft tunes. Yet even with all that help, I felt constantly on edge. Sudden noises made me jump. A raised voice on the television could send my heart racing. Dr. Grant explained that my reactions were a normal response to trauma. "Your nervous system learned that your home was not safe," she said. "It will take time and practice for it to learn that you are safe now." She taught me breathing exercises and grounding techniques, and she reminded me session after session that healing was not linear. Angela connected me with a support group for survivors of domestic violence. The first time I walked into the small room at the community center, I felt like an exposed nerve. But as the weeks went by and I listened to other women share their stories, I realized how similar the patterns were. They all talked about charm, control, isolation, and escalation. Hearing them say things I had never spoken aloud made me feel less alone. When Amara was 7 months old, I went back to teaching at my old high school in Charlotte. My principal had kept my job open and arranged my schedule so that I could attend therapy and court dates when needed. The first day back was terrifying. I stood in front of a new group of teenagers, my legs trembling slightly, and said, "Good morning, I am Ms. Walker. Let us get started." Once I began teaching, muscle memory kicked in. For 45 minutes at a time, I was not a victim or a patient. I was a teacher again. About a year after Amara's birth, Lauren reached out. The hospital's social work department had asked if I would be willing to share my contact information with her, and I had agreed. We met at a coffee shop halfway between Charlotte and Raleigh. When she walked in, I stood up and hugged her harder than I intended. "You look good," Lauren said, smiling. "How are you and the baby?" I pulled out my phone and showed her pictures of Amara, grinning with 2 tiny teeth covered in mashed sweet potato, fast asleep on my chest. "This is because of you," I said. "If you had not done what you did that day..." I could not finish the sentence. Lauren shook her head. "It is because of you," she said. "You told the truth when it was terrifying to do so. I only gave you an opening." I hesitated, then asked the question that had been lingering in my mind. "When you told Rashad that the photographs had already been sent to the Domestic Violence Task Force and the police, was that true?" Lauren stirred her coffee slowly, then looked up. "Not exactly," she said. "We do take photographs. We do report suspected abuse. But it is not as instant or automatic as I made it sound. I needed him to believe there was nothing he could do to interfere. I needed him to feel cornered, so he would be less likely to intimidate you or try to control the story. It was a calculated bluff." I stared at her, amazed by her quick thinking. "You risked a lot," I said. "What if it had made him angrier?" "I weighed that," Lauren said quietly. "But I saw the way he watched you, and I have seen too many women go back home quietly after an accident and not come back at all. I could not let that happen if I could help it." 2.5 years after the assault, I received a notification from Victim Services that Rashad was being released on parole. The old fear surged back, sharp and hot. For a while, I found myself double-checking the locks 3 times a night, glancing over my shoulder in parking lots. Victim Services kept me updated. Rashad had moved to another state as part of his probation conditions. He was attending mandated counseling and had not attempted to contact me. His probation officer confirmed that he had been warned that any contact with me or Amara would result in immediate consequences. Over time, the intensity of my fear dulled, though it never disappeared completely. Now Amara is 4.5 years old. She is in preschool, full of energy and questions. She loves picture books, music, and standing on a step stool to help my mother stir pancake batter on Saturday mornings. Sometimes she will climb into my lap, press her ear to my chest, and say, "I hear your heart, Mommy." She does not know who her father is. Right now, she simply knows that she lives with Mommy and Grandma and Grandpa, and that she is deeply loved. I know that one day she will ask specific questions, and when that day comes, I will answer honestly in ways she can handle. I will tell her that her father made choices that hurt us, and that it was not her fault. I have begun speaking at local events about domestic violence, especially about what can happen during pregnancy. Standing at a podium, looking out at a room of strangers, I tell the story of the nursery, the fall, the blood, and the nurse who refused to look away. I talk about warning signs, control, isolation, constant criticism, and about the importance of believing victims when they speak. After every talk, someone approaches me. Sometimes it is a woman with tear-filled eyes saying, "That was my life too." Sometimes it is a nurse asking, "What exactly did Lauren say that helped you?" I always repeat Lauren's words as clearly as I remember them, because I know those words might save someone else. I started dating again last year. The first coffee date with a man named Jalen was almost comically awkward. My hands shook as I lifted my cup, and I kept waiting for him to slip into that familiar pattern of questions. "Where are you? Who are you with? What time will you be home?" But he did not. He asked about my daughter, my job, my favorite books. When I told him I needed to go home by 8 because my parents were watching Amara, he said, "Of course. Let me walk you to your car." Before our third date, I sat Amara on my lap and said, "Mommy is going to dinner with a friend." She touched my cheek thoughtfully and said, "Is he nice?" I smiled and said, "Yes. He is very gentle." I realized as I said it that gentle had become one of the most important qualities I looked for. My life now is not the life I imagined when I stood in that church in a white dress and promised forever to a man who would later nearly destroy me. It is smaller in some ways, more cautious. I check locks, pay attention to my surroundings, and keep copies of court orders in a folder that has its own spot in my desk. But it is also fuller in other ways. It is filled with my daughter's laughter, my students' progress, my parents' unwavering support, and the quiet strength I have discovered in myself. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is still and Amara is asleep in her little bed with her stuffed animals around her, I lie awake and remember that day in the nursery. The sound of Rashad's voice, the shock of the floor, the terror of the blood. And then I remember the bright, sterile light of the hospital, Lauren's calm voice cutting through the haze, and the moment I realized that someone was finally, firmly on my side. My story is not neat or easy. It is messy and painful, and filled with moments I wish had never happened. But it is also a story of survival. I was beaten on the floor of a nursery while 6 months pregnant, and I lived. My daughter lived. A neighbor listened. A nurse chose to act. A social worker and a lawyer and a therapist stood with me while I rebuilt my life from the ground up. My name is Candace. I am 36 years old. I am a mother, a teacher, and a survivor. My daughter Amara runs through my parents' backyard, squealing with laughter, the winter light catching in her curls, and I know with absolute certainty that we are never going back to the life we had before. The past will always be a part of us, but it does not own us anymore. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.